All right, and welcome back to another episode of Raul's World of Synths. I am Raul. Thanks for joining us again. In the last video, we were looking at a basic audio demonstration of how the Morph Controller can be used with the A135. And if you see this kind of patch in front of us, this is kind of exactly where we left off last time. We were having to take a look at our sine wave, which we're using as a modulation source for the Morph Controller. But it wasn't quite doing exactly the type of morphing that we wanted, because if we look at our oscilloscope over there, we can see that our peak is between 0 and +5, which is what we want, but it's also veering into the negative portion of that, down from 0 to -5. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can kind of fine-tune that and get it to cooperate a little bit more and get it in a nice little range that will work with your morphing controller. So let's actually take this signal. I'm going to unpatch it from my oscilloscope over here. And we're going to actually just unpatch it from there entirely. And I'm going to take it out from here and just go straight in to my input of my offset. Actually, let me get a shorter cable because that black one might interfere. So I'm just going to go sine wave out, input to our offset attenuator. I'm going to bring attenuator all the way to the top, so it's not going to be cutting our signal at all. I'm going to be bringing offset all the way down because I want to start with just a normal signal. And then we're going to take that output and go into our oscilloscope. And we should see pretty close to what we had before. Make sure everything's patched in there. There we go, attenuator. There we go. And let's see, output. Yep. Okay. There we go. If you look at our oscilloscope now, there's our signal. It's right above +5, and then, of course, below in the -5 range. So now this is where we get the A183 involved to kind of adjust that signal. So we'll only be dealing with the positive part of a CV signal. So what we do is we just bring the offset up a little bit, and you should kind of see at the oscilloscope our waveform is kind of sliding ever so slightly up, and we're just going to kind of adjust it until we get the whole waveform above 0. And right about there is pretty close, maybe a little bit higher, like right there or something. And we can see it's kind of going above now. It's going up into the +10 range over there. And that's not going to work either. But at least we're above 0 now, because actually the top part, like the fact that it's going above into the +10, can also be adjusted as well using the same module. But right now, let's focus on getting it above 0, and then we'll kind of move into the second part. So right now, we're at above 0, I believe, pretty close to it anyway, by our oscilloscope. And now we're going to use our attenuator over here, and we're just going to bring it down a little bit. And you can kind of see it's coming down, and coming down, and coming down. And now it's getting a little more manageable. However, now it kind of looks like we might need to bring it down a little bit. So I'll go back to my offset and then bring it down, because I want to just get it in that 0 to +5 range so that I can get a nice smooth morphing back and forth. And right there actually doesn't look too bad. Looks like it's going a little bit over -5 or +5. So let me bring my attenuator down just a little bit, cut a little more signal to get it as close as possible. And right there, we're kind of only in the positive, but we're between 0 and +5, which is kind of where we want to be. And I could bring that up just a little bit if I wanted to kind of get it as perfect as possible. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so now that we have that, let's actually unpatch from our oscilloscope. And now that we know what's coming out of here, and that it's only in the 0 to +5 range, now we can actually use it with our Morph Controller, and we don't have to worry about it producing any kind of artifacts or going into negative when we don't want it to. So I'm just going to take the output from here, and I'm going to patch over into our Morph Controller, and we should get a nice, smooth morphing. Now, if you look at our oscilloscope, that's not quite any kind of indication for us, and that's because our magnification was optimized for our low frequency signal. So let me kind of switch this up a little bit so we can get something that shows us the waveforms flying by. And that's not bad. It's a little bit fast, but okay, let's bring our frequency down a little bit. Still a little bit fast. I want us to be able to see the individual waves one by one. That's pretty close. Let me see if I can't get a little bit closer. So I'm going to fly all the way back through the magnifications. Yeah, that's not bad. So sine all the way to saw. Saw all the way to sine. Sine to saw. So we should see saw to sine. Cool. And so there you go. We now have a little bit more of a controlled CV signal within the range that our A144 Morph Controller needs. And that's how you do it. And it looks like it might even have a little bit of tail on the end of it, so if I wanted to sort of adjust that, I could bring down the attenuator on here. So it's a little smoother. So there isn't that kind of dead spot at the end and the beginning. Now I could have done most of my attenuation here if I wanted to, but for the purposes of our demonstration, I wanted to kind of show how you could integrate the A183 for both offset and attenuation purposes in a patch like this. Okay? So now that we have that CV signal kind of in a more usable range, let's go ahead and try maybe a different waveform. I'm just going to watch the sine one more time. Okay, let's unpatch sine wave, and let's try a triangle wave. And that one's nice too. It's just kind of a slightly different variation. It's just going up through the different waveforms. So it's actually moving, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and then now it's going 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's kind of moving slowly through each one of those. So basically, once you have your patch set up, for the most part, your offset and attenuation settings shouldn't need too much more adjusting. Once you got them in that nice little range there, you can kind of use them for other waveforms as well. So that's our triangle wave. Let's unpatch and we'll try just a saw down here. This one should be a little bit more abrupt since it kind of has that hard edge at the bottom. And it just cuts off at the end. It's probably not the greatest waveform for this particular demonstration. I kind of like the sine. It's nice and smooth. It goes up and then it goes down. And it's kind of cool how it kind of bounces back and forth. And you can kind of use this for special effects if you wanted to, or any other type of patch that you might want to use. Now we did it here with audio, but you can also imagine that since the A135-1 can also deal with low frequency signals or DC signals, you could also use this to patch, let's see, an LFO, the 4 different waveforms of an LFO into this, and then pass that on to some kind of modulation source that you wanted to, like, I don't know, random voltages, adjusting, the CV numbers of values of N at the top. and the bottom of the distributed voltages, or any other kind of combinations you could possibly think of. LFOs, filters, effects, the list goes on and on and on. And so that, in a nutshell, is our A144 audio demonstration. I think we've covered a good deal of the, let's see, manual morphing we did in the first one, and then we kind of jumped into automatic morphing, as it's called in the manual, which for the most part is just CV modulation applied to the CV input of our morph controller. In the next segment, what you have to look forward to is we're going to be showing you how to use the A144 in a slightly different way. With audio rate signals, it can actually be used as a wave shaper. So we're going to show you in a completely different type of patch how you can utilize that. And that's the next series coming up. Now, the segments after that, I'm not 100% sure yet, but we're going to do one of two things. Either do sort of a finale where we show alternate techniques or experimental techniques with stuff that we haven't dealt with yet in this segment or the one that's coming next where we're doing wave shaping. Or we may just kind of do a review and then go into the next series the week after that. So I hope that you found this useful. I know I found this very useful going through it and learning from it. So I encourage you to stay tuned and watch the next segment in this series because you should get something out of it. So keep on patching out there, and thanks for watching.